Hey guys, my name is Matt Johnson with whoismatt.com, and if you're filming videos with the Sony A7S III, FX3, A1, or any of the other more recent Sony cameras that shoot 10-bit video, my favorite picture profile for these cameras is S-Log3. Literally, set your camera to PP8, change no other settings, and you are good to film. But if you're filming with a Sony A7S III or FX3, etc., and you're also using an older Sony camera as well, such as an A7 III, A6600, A6500, or basically any other older Sony camera that came out before the year 2020, in that case, I'm going to recommend that you set your picture profile to PP8, but change the gamma to Cine 4. There's your settings. I hate whenever people make me watch a video for 10 minutes before they finally tell me the settings that I need. But that said, if you want to know why I'm recommending two picture profiles instead of just one, and how to properly expose and film with these two picture profiles, you're gonna have to keep watching. Let's now talk about the first picture profile that I recommend for Sony's newer cameras now, PP8 S-Log3. Make sure you choose PP8, which will show the gamma as S-Log3 and the color mode as S-Gamut3.Cine. Don't choose PP9, which says S-Log3 S-Gamut3, as that will be more difficult to color grade. The reason I prefer filming in PP8 S-Log3 is because this picture profile is going to maximize the dynamic range of these newer Sony cameras and give you the best possible footage that you can get. The only con of this picture profile is that it is a log picture profile, meaning that you're going to have to color grade it and add contrast and saturation if you want it to look its best. To save you time though, and to make this picture profile super easy to film with, I've actually created a set of video presets called whoismatt LUTs that I've created and tested specifically to work with S-Log3. I will link to those LUTs down in the video description. I also want you to know that I'm working on an easy color grading tutorial specifically for S-Log3, so please subscribe if you want to see that soon. Now, let's talk about how to properly expose S-Log3. With a normal picture profile, you traditionally want to get your exposure as close as possible to 0.0 on your camera's metering. This way, your footage won't be too bright or too dark. But keep in mind, S-Log3 isn't a traditional picture profile. It is a log profile specifically created by Sony to maximize the dynamic range of the image that you're recording. Because of that, instead of targeting an exposure of 0.0 on your camera's metering, you should instead be trying to expose between 1.7 and 2 stops over. I realize this may sound really bright, and on the back of your camera screen, the image is definitely going to look bright. But the benefit is that when you color grade your image and add contrast, the color grade will bring down that brightness and it will look awesome. Now there's a lot more I can explain about S-Log3 and how to properly film with it to get the best possible image from your camera, but I feel like that should be its own separate video to keep this from being too all over the place. If you want to see more about how to film with S-Log3 though, leave me a comment and I'll work on that video and link to it down below when it's finished. Moving on, let's talk about the second picture profile that I recommended at the start of this video. As I said, if you are filming with a mix of newer Sony cameras, like the A7S III, FX3, A1, etc., as well as older Sony cameras like the A7 III, A6600, A6400, etc., I'm going to recommend that you set all your cameras to PP8, but change the gamma to Cine 4. Leave everything else the same, just change that. Why am I recommending that you do this though? Why can't you set all of your cameras, even the old ones, to PP8 S-Log3 and call it a day? Well, the reason has to do with color. See, previous Sony cameras like the A7 III recorded video in 8-bit color. This means they could record up to 16.7 million different colors. That sounds pretty good, right? 16 million is a lot of colors. Well, hold on for a second, because one of the headlining features of Sony's newer cameras that highly differentiates them from earlier models is that these new cameras can record in 10-bit color. Instead of 16.7 million colors on the A7 III, the A7S III is now capable of recording over 1 billion colors. 1.07 billion to be precise. That's a huge difference, and it solves a big problem that earlier Sony cameras faced. Come back in time with me now. Here is my Sony A7S II that was released in late 2015. This camera was one of the first mirrorless cameras that Sony released that included S-Log 3, which, as I already mentioned in this video, is going to maximize the dynamic range and quality of footage that you can get from your camera. But here's the twist. I never recommended using S-Log 3 when recording video with the A7S II or the A7 III, A6500, A6600, etc. Basically any camera that Sony released before the year 2020. Why? Because all of these cameras only recorded video in 8-bit color. And when you set a camera like the A7S II to record an S-Log 3 with its very flat image, there simply isn't enough colors to be able to color grade the footage properly. Once you add contrast and saturation, you'll start to see weird lines of color banding in blue skies and even in the skin tones of your footage. This made S-Log 3 basically unusable on the A7S II and any other Sony camera that only recorded in 8-bit. To work around it, I released a video in 2016 called My Favorite Picture Profile for the Sony A7S II, A7 III, etc. And this video covered a picture profile that I called MattFlat that would allow you to film with a similar dynamic range to S-Log 3, but without any of that gross color banding that made it unusable. So can you guess what MattFlat was? PP8 with the gamma set to Cine 4. That sounds familiar. Here I am years after making that video and I'm recommending the same picture profile again. But now, you hopefully understand that if you're using a mix of newer Sony cameras that record 10-bit video and older Sony cameras that record 8-bit, you can set all of them to this MattFlat picture profile, and they will all match up with similar dynamic range and quality, and no banding or other color issues. Also, because I'm betting you're probably wondering, do you need to set your newer Sony cameras like the A7S III to 8-bit when recording this MattFlat picture profile? No. You can keep them at 10-bit. That color information will only help you in color grading and help you match up these cameras. Now, let's talk about how to properly expose MattFlat. The main thing I would keep in mind is that this is still a log picture profile, meaning that you don't want your camera's metering to read 0.0. You are going to want it to be brighter. In this case, I would recommend exposing your image anywhere from 0.3 to 0.7 stops over on the camera's metering. You don't have to go as bright as full S-Log 3 with its 1.7 to 2 stops over, but you still want the image to be a bit brighter than normal. This will help you a ton when color grading. Speaking of helping you a ton, my LUTs are also tuned to work with the MattFlat picture profile, so they should help you save some time there as well. Lastly, let's wrap this up by talking about one more picture profile. When Sony announced their FX9 cinema camera a few years ago, it included a fantastic picture profile called S-Cinetone. This picture profile gave the camera a gorgeous image that looked incredible straight out of camera, meaning that if you filmed with it, you wouldn't need to color grade your footage. The only downside is that it came with less dynamic range, but the benefit and speed of filming something that looked good straight out of camera was very appealing to many filmmakers. Fast forward to 2020, and Sony has now included S-Cinetone in all their newest cameras, including the A7S III via their 2.0 firmware update. Now, the reason I'm talking to you about all this is because I've received numerous comments from filmmakers asking what I think about S-Cinetone, and if that is my new favorite picture profile. In short, S-Cinetone is not my favorite, because while I do love the colors and skin tones that you can get from it, the dynamic range is not nearly as good as you can get from S-Log 3. And if you film run and gun style like me, where you don't have full control over your lighting, and you need the flexibility that you can get from a log image, I greatly prefer S-Log 3 over S-Cinetone. That said though, if you want me to go more in depth with S-Cinetone in a future video, just like I'm gonna do with S-Log 3, leave me a comment below and I will work on it. With that, those are my two favorite picture profiles for Sony cameras. If you're filming with a mix of old and new cameras, you have MattFlat. And if you're filming with newer Sony cameras, I guess I'll call it MattFlat 2.0, even though it's just PP8 S-Log 3. You don't have to call it that, but I will probably put that in the title in case you need to find this video again. Very last thing now. If you're using the Sony A7S III, FX3, A1, etc., and you want access to all of my settings for these cameras, I've created tutorials walking through how to set them up. And as a bonus, if you use the A7S III, you can download my settings file, which you can load into your camera and instantly have every setting tuned for filmmaking. You can download those settings for free at the link down below. With that, thank you so much for watching. Please check out my Who is Matt Lutz, and have a great day.